this episode of the podcast, I talk with the master of horror himself, the great Mick Garris. I've been a fan of Mick since his Stand miniseries back in 1994, and I also thoroughly enjoyed the whole Masters of Horror series that came on Showtime back in the day. I can remember going to Target, Walmart, you name it, to find all the discs, to go along with the series and stuff. So, really cool. And yeah, it was one hell of an honor to speak with Mick, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for listening. I'd rather keep my horror to film and books instead of real life.
No kidding. No kidding.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Besides all the craziness, how's your week been?
Other than that, it's been really good. Things are coming together. Projects that we just closed a deal on a series that I will let you know more about when the time is right. But and there's a couple of things in the works now, so I'm actually more active than I've been in years.
And I really appreciate you being on the podcast. This is a huge honor, like really big honor.
Oh, well, thanks, Brandon. You've been sharing our stuff and being a very supportive listener and friend online and all. And I wish all the best to you.
I appreciate that. Like, listen to Mortem and stuff was a big reason I got into podcasting, because I've been doing music for half my life, like at least 15, cool. 16 years. And
what do you
what's that?
What do you play?
Guitar player and also vocals. If you want to call them vocals, they're more like harsh screams.
All right. Okay. A little black metal there. Huh?
Actually, yeah, we're considered like black metal, doom metal type stuff. It's a little bit of psychedelic thrown in there,
It all goes well with horror, doesn't it?
It does. The connection there is great. And doing this podcast, I've been talking to people in the metal world as well as the horror world and stuff. And the connection there is just like instant,
Yeah, we our current episode that's running right now as you and I are recording is with Grady Hendrix, who talks a lot about the correlation between horror and metal in particular.
Yeah, Grady's cool, and he's actually from the same area I'm from, Charleston, South Carolina, which is crazy.
Charleston? Oh, yeah. I've been there. It's an amazing place.
It is, and we have a lot of history, and there's a lot of dark history, especially like in our downtown area and stuff, like the old jail cells and all kinds of other creepy stuff,
Yeah, it's I've seen some of that too, and it's a beautiful city, but you can tell there's a deep, dark past underneath the veneer.
Yeah, so very similar like New Orleans, if I was to say, like in terms of like history and feel, like we have a very similar feel.
Yeah, definitely. But even, there's a big genteel element that goes with Charlotte that New Orleans has, but it's a different flavor.
Right. And I consider our seafood a little bit better, but that's just me.
There you go. Your home food is always the best.
Exactly. Well, Mick, how did everything get started for you?
Well, I was just drawn to the horror genre at a very early age. I started watching them, probably when I was 6 or 7 years old, if that. And it always appealed to me. I think it's very common for it to happen to the outsiders among us. And I was very much an outsider. I was one of 4 kids, and we did not socialize with one another very much. Everybody had their own interests and the like, and so I followed a darker path, creatively anyway. But my father had been a very talented artist who never got a chance to make his living with his art, but it inspired me, and I was one of the 4 kids who drew. And that drawing my interest turned to writing after that, and was doing music like you. I was a singer and a songwriter and in a band, a prog rock band in the 70s. And I was always fascinated with movies and television. And I grew up in a world of media more like people do today than they did when I was growing up. I just always had a love for books that are on the outre side of things, for music that wasn't popular, for horror films, books, television, all of those things. Saturday afternoons, they'd run really cheesy movies like The Four Skulls of Jonathan Drake and things like that that nobody's heard of today. But all of it was good to me. And then I started interviewing on my own interview show on a Los Angeles cable TV station called the Z Channel. And I had guests on there like Steven Spielberg and Roger Corman and Christopher Lee. And all that time I was writing screenplays with the hope of making it happen. But it was when I was doing a documentary on the making of the Goonies and interviewing Steven Spielberg on the set while we were setting up the lights and everything. And he asked me what I was doing, and he had known me before because I'd done publicity on E.T. And Poltergeist. And so I told him I was trying to make it as a writer, and the timing was just right. And he said, we're looking for writers for a series I'm creating called Amazing Stories. And at that time, my agent had sent a script that I'd written as a sample to his people. And while Stephen was up in Astoria, Oregon, being interviewed by me, his readers were writing a report on how much they liked this script, and they said they should hire me. And so that was my first job. I was on food stamps when I got the call from Spielberg to come write for him.
Wow. That's crazy, especially having your first job with, Spielberg like that. That's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, it doesn't start any better than that.
How was it working alongside him and stuff? Like, how was he?
He was amazing. One of the reasons he did Amazing Stories was to create opportunities for young filmmakers like myself, for people who'd just come out of film school, like Phil Joanno or Leslie Linka Glatter, people who showed promise, but didn't have a professional job. They'd made short films or whatever. And in this case with Stephen, he'd read my writing. And so he gave me an opportunity on that show, as he did for many other young filmmakers, in addition to people like Bob Zemeckis and Martin Scorsese and Clint Eastwood and himself. Mm-hmm. So it was the greatest experience, the greatest film school you could ever imagine. And he was incredibly encouraging, and ideas dripped off him like sweat. It was an amazing time to be around the guy who was the most successful and popular filmmaker in the history of the country.
Right. No, that's killer. And that's the best way to start off, is to go with the best, And
yeah,
back then, even now, he's still like one of the best ever,
Absolutely. There's no denying the talent that he has. And the opportunity to begin my career under those auspices was pretty amazing, and it seemed like it could only go down from there.
I think it's the opposite. I think it totally, you continue to put out great stuff between the books, the podcast, the movies, greatness. So
thank you. I was lucky that, the next Stephen I hooked up with was Stephen King, and we have a great long history together as well that was every bit as fantastic an experience as you could hope it would be. We became friends and have worked together a lot, and it's given me opportunities to do all kinds of things. I'm working on something with Clive Barker now, and I'm so lucky to be able to collaborate with so many of my heroes. It's a very humbling experience.
How did you first meet Stephen King?
We first met on the set of Sleepwalkers, actually. We had talked before, but I was being interviewed to direct Sleepwalkers because I had done Critters 2 and Psycho 4. Psycho 4 had a similar theme with the mother-son relationship. And King had director approval. And I had met with the studio executives about doing it. And they said, well, we want to hire you. We have to interview another director as a favor to his agent, who's somebody we do business with. So they did that the next day, and they hired the other director. Mm-hmm. The other director started rewriting King's script so that it had very little to do. And you can't put Stephen King's name on a movie that he doesn't feel possessory credit for the screenplay. And so when he kept making these changes, they realized this might not be the right marriage. and they ended up removing him from the project. And they called me up and moved me into the office that day. And I started working on the script and doing rewrites and dealing with King on the telephone. And there'd be studio notes, and I would say, "Do you want me to attack these?" And he'd say, "No, let me give it a try." And the next morning, there'd be 6 pages in the old fax machine that King did that were brilliant. And, it was really a lot of fun. But the day I met him was the day we shot the scene with him and Clive Barker and Tobe Hooper.
Oh, wow.
And it was just amazing. I had kind of planned this would be a trifecta that none of the standard audience would know, but the fans would know. And they go, "Wait, that's Stephen King. Oh, wait, that's Clive Barker. Hey, wait, that's Tobe Hooper." It was so much fun. You could cut that scene out of the movie and no one would know, but we would, you and me, Brandon, right?
Yeah, that's killer. I mean, those are the greats. I mean, Clive Barker, you, Stephen King, Tobe Hooper. I mean, it don't get much better than that, Really
we all became really good friends. And, Tobe is so greatly missed. He was somebody I was incredibly close to. And just as vicious as his films were, that's how sweet he was in real life. He was like a teddy bear. Really, really great guy with his cigars and Dr. Pepper.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about him. Super nice fellow from what I hear. So
really good guy.
Yeah, like your Stephen King adaptions are some of my favorites, especially The Stand. I mean, it doesn't get much better than your version of The Stand, especially after our last this TV show that came out a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, King wrote the screenplay for the miniseries that we did, and that's a great place to start. When you've got a great script written by the author of the novel, his biggest selling novel ever. I mean, it allowed us to get a great cast. The production was unbelievably complicated and difficult, but it all worked out. The weather was always opposite of what it should be, but sometimes in the face of adversity, it makes your work better. You work harder, and I don't think I'll ever work that hard again. That was 100 days of shooting, and it was rough.
I bet that's a lot of days, and it was hot and stuff too where y'all were at, correct?
Well, it depended. We were shooting for 5 months, so we were in the middle of winter for part of it in Salt Lake City and the environs, and then it would be summertime in other places. It was a long shoot, 5 months long, so you could never rely on the weather.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy. So you're kind of living The Stand as well as filming The Stand.
Yeah, and what's interesting about The Stand is how much of it takes place outside. And so shooting hours were crazy, lots of night shooting, and the most complex things you can do, shooting at night, shooting on the road, driving stuff, multiple locations. We had 95 scripted locations. We shot in 6 states and on a television budget. It was tight, but it was also a really close family. It took a full year to make that. 2 months of pre-production, 5 months of shooting, and then another 5 months of post-production in New York. So I was away from home for a year doing this. So not the best thing on your marriage, as you might imagine, but we weathered it.
Yeah, I can relate with being away for a little while, just being we did about 4 U.S. tours and stuff, and being away from my wife on tour and my cats. It was fucking hard.
Yeah. Oh.
Couldn't imagine being gone a whole year.
It was an amazing experience, and it's like the world stops for a year. When you come back after you've finished a year long of work, it's like your life yesterday was the day before that year. So it's just this missing slice out of the pie of life for you,
Right. But, the work that you made from that, all that, time and grueling effort and stuff really paid off. So.
Oh, thank you. I'm really happy with how it turned out. And it turned into the biggest rating success of any miniseries in history. So I was not used to having things that were so broadly seen. Sleepwalkers was the #1 movie when it came out that weekend, but only that week. And only the horror fans went and saw that, the hardcore. Whereas with The Stand, a lot of people who weren't into horror saw it and got into the drama and the characters of it.
I can remember staying up super late. I think I was in middle school when The Stand came out. It could have been late elementary school, but I
Uh,
can remember staying up till like 10 or 11 o'clock to watch the miniseries. Like those are
yeah,
good times.
yeah, great. Yeah, that was 94, May of
94, yeah,
94.
elementary school for me then.
Good parenting. Yeah.
Oh yeah, my parents, that was a cool thing about growing up. I never had any restrictions on what I could watch. Like I
Yep.
can remember watching Freddy's Nightmare, the TV series when
Oh,
I
yeah,
was
I
like
did one of
5 or
those.
so. And yeah, I had no restrictions on that, so that was cool.
Yeah, I did the third episode of Freddy's Nightmares.
Oh, actually, speaking of that, I got Screenbox just for Freddy's Nightmares because now they have it on Screenbox. So I'm like, I gotta watch that. So
Yeah, they do. I don't know how well it holds up. I would not recommend that my episode as a starting place to view my work, but it's there for eternity. So have at it.
I'm about to be on the third episode too. I think I watched the second one a couple days ago. I'm kind of taking it slow and just like letting it all sink back in. Like, oh, I remember that. So your
Yeah.
episode is next.
Well, Toby did the first one, and my friend Tommy McLaughlin did the second one, and then I was up next.
I still think it holds up to me. It has that weird like late 80s, early 90s feel to it. Like it still holds up and it's still really creepy.
Well, they really went for it because it was not network TV, it was syndication, so they got away with a lot of it. But yeah, and it was shot in 16 millimeter film, so it has kind of an 80s grit to it that Toby was especially comfortable with. Yeah.
It's almost filmed like a dark soap opera, almost like maybe like Dark Shadows or something. It's got that feel to it.
Yeah, it was odd because it was an hour-long show, but there were two stories in every show so that they could syndicate it as half hours if they needed to. They never did, but that was the plan, was to split it up so they could have more shows in syndication.
Going back to Stephen King, what is your favorite adaptation of his work that you've done that you take most pride in?
Well, it changes all the time and for different reasons. The Stand obviously was the biggest success ever, and probably had the biggest impact on its audience. I think The Shining, the filmmaking is even better, and it's a more enclosed and more polished story. We had a budget and a production that we weren't running and gunning like we were on The Stand. So I'm very proud of that. The one that's the most personal for me, though, is Riding the Bullet. That was something that I wrote the screenplay. I optioned the script from King, or the story from King, and turned it into something really personal that had to do with the passing of my parents and my brother. It's about getting a second chance at life, or at least trying for it. So that was something, the least commercially successful thing I've ever done, but the most personal, and something I'm proud of that a lot of people have never seen. So.
Right. Yeah, whoever's listening, my listeners definitely check out Riding the Bullet. And I think it's on Amazon Prime. Last time I saw it floating around, I believe. It might be on like Tubi now, but I've seen it all over the place, so it's out there.
Yeah, that's good. Hopefully you'll see it on Amazon Prime because it won't be cut and won't have commercials.
Yeah, that's the only thing I don't like about Tubi. Tubi is kind of my last result when I'm looking for horror films, but I can't stand commercials. That's why I pay for so many apps.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Yeah, I cannot sit through commercials.
Yeah, nowadays, like with the technology we have, we shouldn't have to sit through commercials, but I understand they have to do that to maintain their like free costs, because Tubi's free and it is pretty cool for a free service. You can't really beat that.
Yeah, it's great. And otherwise, you have to pay for it. So, and, they keep raising the prices. I think Amazon just went up this week. Netflix went up last month. Once they hook you, you're in for good.
I'm telling you. Luckily with Shudder, I think they've only went up once since I've been a member, and I've been a member of Shudder since the very beginning. So hopefully they stay the same.
They are great. I really like Shudder, and I like the people there. You know, we did Nightmare Cinema with them,
Hmm.
and working on a project with them right now.
Oh,
So
that's
we'll see a series. So I think it'll be something you and your listeners will appreciate.
speaking of Nightmare Cinema. I have a signed, I think it's a signed VHS. No, it might not be a signed VHS, but Witter Entertainment and Broke Horror Fan did a VHS version of that film a few years ago, and I got the big giant clam box version of it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
it might be signed. I know they had me sign 50 of them.
I think I may have got to sign one. I don't really touch it. I don't want to like put that VHS in my VCR and like totally fuck it up. So that one sticks like, that's one of my precious gems,
Yeah, I know the feeling. I don't think I've had a VCR hooked up to my television for a long time.
We've got one downstairs. It's hooked up and ready to go, but I'm just so afraid that's going to eat my tapes. I don't want to fuck with it. I have a Mandy VHS I got off of eBay. That was one of the like promo VHSs when Mandy came out, and it would not touch my VCR.
Yeah, keep it pristine. VCR heads just clog, and once they do, they just crumple all the tape as it goes through.
Right. And if you want to see VCR quality, there's plenty of like killer 80s films on YouTube you can watch. They're still in VCR quality, VHS quality, so.
Yeah, they just ripped them from the cassette. So.
Do you remember the show Werewolves from like 1989, 1990?
Yeah, on Fox. Yeah, yeah.
They have that up on YouTube because there's a bunch of like copyright things going on with the music in that series. So there's no DVDs of it. There's no Blu-rays. If they are, they're ripped from VHS or ripped right from TV. So like that was one I wish they would do like a Blu-ray of. That would be killer. But I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
That was a good show. It was one of the rare horror shows that felt like it was made by people who got it.
Right. I think if I'm not mistaken, Baker did the werewolves on those, or at least designed them.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
It says in the credits, and you can kind of tell just by how they look and stuff. They look good, so I always credit that to Baker.
Yeah, there's a lot of good people who were working at that time who came out of Baker's shop, Steve Johnson and Greg Canham and Bill Corso and all these great guys who've gone on to become Oscar winners themselves. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, how did you get into podcasting? Like, I know you've been doing interviews and all for a really long time, but like podcasting in general, how did you get onto that?
Well, it wasn't my idea. My producer, Joe Russo, he produced Nightmare Cinema with me. Mm-hmm. He was at a party and a friend of his worked for Podcast One, and they're the biggest podcast company in the world. Mm-hmm. And so he and the friend were talking about the possibility of doing the podcast because I had done a 10-episode series for the FearNet TV channel where I did a post-mortem TV show where we had Rick Baker and William Friedkin and John Carpenter and Toby Hooper, and we did 10 of them. Mm-hmm. And it was really great. And they're still available. You can go to mickgarrisinterviews.com and see all my old Z Channel interviews, as well as those interviews and making of documentaries that I've made and stuff. And then that was done when FearNet was done. And Joe was talking to his friend at this party and talking about the possibility of doing a postmortem podcast. And I didn't even know they were having this discussion. Mm-hmm. So Joe asked me if I'd be interested in meeting with them. And I said, sure. And the head of the company of Podcast One was Norm. Now I forget his last name, but it was a huge radio guy. And forming Podcast One, he owned Westwood One, which was the major radio syndicator. And so they called me into the office and they were selling me on doing a podcast. Mm-hmm. Here they're doing all these podcasts with Adam Carolla and Dr. Drew and all these people, the biggest podcasts in the world, and pitching me on it. And so I thought, well, this would be fun. I love doing interviews. It's an education. They're talking about all the money that Adam Carolla and these other people are making. Well, that's not the same as it is for a horror conversation podcast. It's a much more limited audience. And but we did the show. People really liked it. I enjoyed doing it. I learned something from every guest I had on. And really turned into an educational experience for me and keeping me on top of things, keeping me contemporary, which I try to do anyway. But in this case, it was necessary for me to see all the new stuff and keep conversations going, not just with the masters, the guys who'd been doing it, the veterans for a long time, but as well as people who were making really impressive stuff. So we started at Podcast One. I made a total of $500 for the year we spent, the 10 months we spent there. Then we moved to Fangoria. Then we moved to Blumhouse. And now this is our second year with Dread Central, with the Dread Podcast Network, and very happy there. And we've done over 100 interviews now, not counting the AMAs. And it's just a format that I never expected to be a part of, but seems to fit really well. I mean, I started doing music interviews when I was in high school, and I interviewed Ray Bradbury was my favorite author for my high school paper, and I interviewed Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, and as a teenager, and I interviewed Rod Serling, creator of the Twilight Zone and all, and so I'd been doing it as a journalist for several years before I started to make my living as a screenwriter and director and producer. Mm-hmm. And so it was a natural fit because now I'm interviewing people as a peer rather than as a journalist or a fan or something. And
Right.
So it gives the show a very different personality.
That's killer. Like, out of all the years of you interviewing people, music and horror, like, do you have any favorites? I know it's going to be hard as hell to narrow it down, but
well, it's really hard when you've done hundreds. But
right.
Getting Stephen King to open up, it was his first ever podcast interview. That was great, and we're friends. And the Clive Barker interview was so open and heartbreaking, and really beautiful. Having interviewed Toby on the TV version of Postmortem, people like that, but the people who've passed are the ones that are the most important to me right now. We did Wes Craven on the TV show. Mm-hmm. I've interviewed so many people and people who are up there in years, but still kicking ass, like Roger Corman. I've interviewed him a few times, and it just feels like an honor to be able to peer into their brains and share their knowledge with people like me who are hungry for that knowledge, who
Right.
want to find out how people create and what their process is and what drives them and what inspires them. I really mean it when I say I've learned something from every single interview I've done. But the special ones are the people like Larry Cohen, who, and Toby and Wes, who are no longer with us, Stuart Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
These were people, very unique individuals. They weren't like anybody else. They were icons. And the privilege of being friends with them and having open conversations with them about who they are and what they do, that's really meaningful to me, and it continues to drive me.
That's killer. And speaking like your guest, the Clive Barker episode, Postmortem, was one of my all-time favorites of any podcast because I'm a giant fan of Clive Barker. Like, he motivated me a lot when it comes to music and stuff because we did a whole album dedicated to the Great and Secret Show.
Oh, wow.
Barker, yeah, it was a whole had that theme going through the whole thing and stuff, and like I don't know, it just really opened my eyes to different types of horror.
Yeah,
something really special.
There is nobody like him. There have been people who've tried it, and so many people who try to adapt his work to the screen don't get it. They kind of turn it into ordinary horror, and his horror is extraordinary and so personal and painful. His books can bring you to tears, and that podcast really was heartbreaking at times because of what he's gone through. the last 6 or 7 years. There were 6 years where he was out of commission because he was in a coma. He had been in a coma, and coming out of it so weakened him that he couldn't write. He couldn't do so many things. And now I'm happy to say he's back. He's written 2 new novels, a book of poetry, and some stuff we're working on together.
Yeah. Is there anything you can say about what y'all two are working on together, or is that top secret?
I've been told not to for a while.
Okay, I figured that, but I was like, I gotta ask anyways, because that's like the ultimate y'all two combining up for something badass. So
it'll be announced very soon.
Cool. So, that'd be great. I can't wait for that.
Yeah. You and me both. I can't wait to just start digging in, sitting down at the keyboard, and letting her rip.
Nice. Have you been seeing anything that's really hit you hard movie-wise in the past few years or so? Like, what's some of your favorite films recently?
Well, Last Night in Soho was great. That was my favorite movie of last year, and it really hit me hard. That's a tough question because I always space on it. I know there have been like 10 movies that I think are fantastic, but His House I thought was really great. The Netflix movie by Remy Weeks. A couple of years ago, what is the name of Karin Kusama's movie? About the cult in the Hollywood Hills.
Not
The Invitation. It's a one word like that. I'm spacing on it.
That's cool.
No, but it's one of the best movies I've ever seen. Let me just quickly look up Karin Kusama. The Invitation. It's The
Invitation. Okay, yeah, that's a great movie.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite movies ever. And I think she's an amazing filmmaker. There's been a lot of really great stuff. I just saw one called Fresh that is really fascinating with Sebastian Stan, the guy who plays Tommy Lee in Pam and Tommy. Okay. Which itself is, you don't expect a series called Pam and Tommy to be high quality viewing, but it's really terrific. It's more than a dirty pleasure, a guilty pleasure. It's actually really well done.
Yeah, I think that's streaming on Hulu right now, I believe, the Pam and Tommy show.
It is. Yeah. And, like I said, it doesn't sound like something you want to see, but it's really worthwhile.
You got me onto a really good show. I'm looking on my phone right now I keep everything tracked on Internet Movie Database because there's so much stuff out there.
30 Coins?
I love 30 Coins. I was one too, but the recent one was looking back right now. Hold on a second. Severance.
Oh boy, that's iTunes. Terrific.
Oh, I just watched the 3rd episode today. It just came out, I think, yesterday. Wow.
Yeah, I watched it last night. Yeah.
I love stuff to make you think like that, and it's just so weird. It's that weird, like darkly comedic sci-fi, like oddness. It's such an odd show.
Well, people don't understand Ben Stiller is a director who is so versatile and so talented. I'm a huge fan of his, and as a director as well as a performer. And I think he's pretty much moved out of the acting thing to concentrate on directing. And his work on this is just terrific. He directed the first 3 episodes and the last 3 episodes. So I am totally hooked. 30 Coins was another show by Alex de la Iglesia that out of Spain. It's in Spanish with subtitles, but it's on HBO Max. Highly recommended. And of course, Mike Flanagan's Midnight Mass is one of the best things you'll ever see on television. So there's a lot of great horror, and the best of it seems to be on television.
I know, which is crazy. Like to go along with Midnight Mass, which was one of my favorite things of last year or year before last. So years are kind of getting kind of weird in thought, so they're kind of blending into one. But did you ever check out Chapel Wait? That was on Epix.
Yeah, I saw one of them, and there's so many things that you forget what you're watching, and that was one of them. So, I really enjoyed the episode that I saw. Now, thanks for reminding me. I'll have to go back.
Yeah, they're all out now, so you can binge watch them all, and it's so good. It's another. it goes together with Midnight Mass really well with the whole vampiric stuff, you know. So I think it'd be a great one to combo up with that.
And it's inspired by King. Did you ever see The Outsider on HBO?
Oh, yes, The Outsider was so damn good. Yeah.
That's one I never hear people talk about, and it's one of the best King adaptations ever. And Jason Bateman is another actor, comedic actor turned director, who's really terrific. He directed the pilot and some other episodes, as well as starring in the first few episodes. But yeah, that's another thing I'd highly recommend. Really intelligent adult mainstream horror. Mainstream meaning it's not gutter horror.
Right.
Which I love too.
Same here.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to get a nice mix of both, you know.
Absolutely.
But yeah, after watching The Outsider, I went and read the book, and it stayed really close with the book. Like it didn't, far off too much. So really good. So dark, man, and I love the antagonist. Like so weird. Like what is this? It never really explained what he was, which I like. I like it, kind of leave it up to you to have your own ideas, but. It's so good, man. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend watching that, like for people listening. So
yeah, here's a show all about recommendations that we can go on for hours.
Yeah, I do love good recommendations. I've gotten so many from your podcast, especially some of your guests. Like if I didn't know their work beforehand, I would definitely know about their work after. So
thank you. Well, that's another cool thing about the podcast, that everybody on the show is really interesting, and they're on there because they've done interesting work. Even if you haven't seen their work, or maybe even if you haven't even heard of them, the conversations are always interesting. There's always stuff to learn. There's always a perspective that you're not savvy about. And it's what keeps me going. We're in our 6th year now, and it's only because there's really interesting people out there. And I try not to repeat guests. Sometimes I do because of anniversaries of a film coming up, or, various things like that. But, with all of the different people we've had on, and it just still feels fresh to me. I still get excited when we're going to record each show.
Yeah, it's always a highlight for me when I see new episodes up on whatever app I'm using at the time. So it's really nice.
Cool.
I also have some questions about band life. Like, how was that? Like, how was it being a front man? Like, you got any cool stories on that?
It was pretty great, Well, we never made our living at it like you did. But
I didn't make a living. Let me get no living on it. We barely broke even. So
2-year tour with no, that's rough. But it was all original, and it started out, in the very beginning in 1970, where we did kind of country rock, and we just grew, and our tastes became more sophisticated. We started listening to people like Gentle Giant and Yes, but we were also funny. We all had a sense of humor, and we made fun of ourselves on stage, and made fun of the audience and the people we played with and all. But the music was pretty complex. And ironically, just a year or so ago, we took a bunch of our old recordings from the 70s, our demos, because we never put out an album. And we added new vocals and new instrumentation layers and remixes and stuff like this, and digitized it. And we actually put it out as a CD. It's also the band is Horse Feathers. The album is called Symphony for a Million Mice. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Music. It's on everything. It was so much fun opening for the Kinks and various other acts like that. But, it was incredibly recreational. Mm-hmm. And when you are in front of a group of people, and you're the front man in a band, and they're all there because they want to like you. They enjoy your music. They show up. They're familiar with it, or they've heard about you, or there's a reason you're there. And we were fairly theatrical. And when they're with you and they're cheering, and there's 3,000 of them in a stadium or something, it's an amazing feeling. But that said, as much as I enjoyed that, it was not difficult at all for me to turn to a life behind the camera.
Yeah.
So I had that part of my ego fulfilled enough, not financially, but socially. And being able to be a guy behind the camera and behind the scenes suits me at least as well, probably a lot better.
How long did that last with the musician stuff? Like, how long did that go for?
We were together over 7 years. The same five guys. We never changed any people until the very end, when that really was kind of a result of that broke us up. But they're still my best friends. One of them passed away in the 90s, the year that we made the stand. But the remaining three guys are still three of my best friends. We see each other. The album is out there. So we have a permanent record that's public now of what we did. And, it was I'm so grateful that I was able to experience that part of it, and so grateful that I did not make it my career, because it would have been over decades ago.
Yeah, you made the right choice, that's for sure. But I'm not saying music's bad, but music is so hard to get into and actually make money doing it,
Yeah. And harder than ever now, because everything streams.
Yeah, everything streams. Like, if you want to throw a record out there, like we did a whole bunch of vinyls and stuff. I mean, we printed so many damn vinyls of our last two records. We hardly sold any of them. People were just like,
how's your
"Oh,
garage?"
just get it digitally," I'm like, okay. Maybe signed a few of those. I was like, "Oh, cool. Let me sign your vinyl." I was like, "All right, cool. I got you on this." And everybody's just doing streaming stuff now. So
Yeah. We made CDs and we sold them because you can sign a CD or the vinyl record. But we were going to do a big signing at Dark Delicacies, the horror store here in Burbank. And COVID happened. So the band members weren't able to do it. We had a bunch of them printed up and ready to go. And then, mail order only, guys. That's horsefeathersmusic.com.
highly recommend my listeners checking that out for sure.
Yeah.
Dark Delicacies, man. That's a great store. I wish I had a place like that close by me. Unfortunately, we don't have any like cool horror stores, even bookstores where I'm at right now. So,
Well, being in LA is an important part of it, because they sell books that people sign, and DVDs and Blu-rays and posters and all that stuff. They're really great. I mean, just last week they had Joe Dante and Belinda Bolasky signing The Howling 4K that just came out. So,
oh wow, I didn't know about that. I got to go on their website now, so I know they do ship out, because I've ordered stuff from them before. So that would be killer to have if they have any copies left, which I doubt it. So
they probably have some signed copies there if they haven't sold them all out.
Yeah, that place is really cool. Seems like y'all have more like horror entertainment type stuff around your area more than we have here in South Carolina. We have like maybe one store that I know of, and that's like freaking 100 miles away. That does like any kind of horror signings or anything like that. I don't know. We don't have a lot here, so.
Well, LA is the center of world entertainment, even though not all of it's made here, because it's cheaper to go to Canada or other states, that just the rates are lower and all. But there's a big horror community out here that's very supportive, and a lot of them know each other, hang out together, the horror fans and the horror creators. There's not a wall between them here.
Right. No, I think that's cool. And definitely need more of that. We need to spread that along this coast a little bit,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not there. It's here, but it's just not around me. I'm gonna have to drive 50 miles anywhere to, get some good like horror entertainment stuff that I want to order online, book wise, anything like that. So.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about LA is that that's where all the creators are based. So you can get somebody to show up at a screening or at a signing or things like that. It's a lot easier. Or on my podcast, although since COVID, almost all of them have been done via Zoom. Although we've done one in person since then, and we're going to do another one next week here at the Night Sky Productions World Headquarters, overlooking the glamorous San Fernando Valley.
Nice. Yeah, always love the intro. You nail it with that. I guess you prefer doing them in person over like Zoom or Skype or whatever.
Now that it's safe, yeah. It's so much easier. You know, you're an interviewer. It's so much easier to go into the tributaries and to just be seated across from one another and in conversation. It feels more like a conversation than when there's a screen between you.
Yeah, that's true. It's always weird, especially if somebody has a really bad lag on their side.
Yeah, yeah.
That's always the worst. It's happened a few times. On my side, actually, I had to upgrade my internet and stuff. Because like I was using my iPhone at one time because my internet was so bad. I'm like, I can't have that. Like that's horrible.
Yeah, we've often had technical problems where it freezes up and the like, and I just revamped my internet connection here in my office studio. So hopefully we got no dropouts or freezes.
No, it's been sounding great so far.
Excellent.
Do you have any future projects you can talk about that we can look forward to?
Yeah, well, there is this anthology series with people you admire that we've just closed the deal to write the pilot, and we'll see what happens with that. There's another series that I wrote the pilot and a 10-episode outline based on a Stephen King story that has a very big TV star attached to who's going to be pitching it with us after he does. He's doing a pilot for one of the networks next month. So after that, we're going to go out pitching this. And there's a feature film that I first had the idea like 30 years ago, but I totally rewrote it and started from page one and redid it, and it has now been optioned by a production company that is out to directors right now. So we shall see. It's something that I would love to have directed, but it's not right culturally. I'm not the right guy to direct it. To write it, yes, maybe, but not to direct it. But I'm more active now than I've been in a long time, since before COVID, for sure.
That's great news. Yeah, you stay busy even before like COVID. Like, you're always doing something. That's super cool.
I used to travel a lot to festivals around the world, and that kept me really busy, but not for over 2 years now.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Hopefully one day we can go back to some sort of normalcy. I mean, it seems to be opened up a little bit now with the virus stuff, but now you have all this other shit going on, which is just as bad, and
yeah, it seems like it's opening up, and there's a festival in England, Grimfest in May, in Manchester, England, that I'm supposed to be the guest of honor, and it's all booked and everything, so it's feeling like that's going to work out. And there are a couple others that I'm going to actually going to shoot a cameo in a documentary about Stephen King in Maine in a little over a week from now. So
the perfect place to do a documentary on Stephen King.
Exactly. Bangor, Maine.
Nice. That should be fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent. Well, Mick, I really appreciate you being on the podcast. It's been one hell of an honor. And like I already said that before, but I'm going to say it again. You're a huge inspiration.
To finally have a conversation, Brandon.
Yeah, it's nice.
Facebook friends forever. So.
Exactly. And I will continue with my support, sharing until Facebook says I can't share anymore, which you're good about that, put me on restriction.
Absolutely. And I will certainly share this with everybody.
Excellent, Mick. And I hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
You too. Take care, Brandon. Good to chat.
Take care.